Welcome back to More Than Macros Radio. I'm your host, Coach B, and I have a special guest today, Miss Andrea. What do we fit
Wonder Woman.
I can never say it. So I'm going to just let you do that. Okay. So we've had Andrea on the podcast before. She's a former client, but still I like to call her my client because we do still continue to talk. She bounces some questions off of me all the time, and we have great conversations behind the scenes. We go for coffee, and now we're podcasting. So, and you'll probably hear Andrea on here a little bit more often, just simply because as a reoccurring guest, because not only has she been an amazing client and a transformation, and that's what we're going to talk about today, but she's also a motivational speaker that's trying to really share with the world, well, mostly teachers, actually. You have a specific demographic, what it means to really take care of yourself. And it doesn't have to be, specifics in terms of like just weight loss, right? Which is obviously the transformation you've experienced, but and that's why we're here today, because it is absolutely more than what we see on the outside. So we're just going to talk about that, the transformation being more than the pounds lost. And we are talking about this because you brought this to my attention through an Instagram live that you were part of, where that other person had mentioned like, hey, Andrea, you don't even focus on the pounds lost. So let's talk about that.
Yeah.
What was your response to that when she had said, like, you don't even really talk about it?
Yeah, it was so funny because like she told me to introduce myself, and I was introducing, and I was like, I went through this journey and I like transformed myself and my habits and blah, 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 and whatever. And she's like, but you're forgetting like the biggest thing. And I was like, oh, what's that? And she was like she didn't say it. And then I kind of was like, oh yeah, like, I guess I did lose 60 pounds. Yeah. And that was like what I had texted you about, because it so is off my radar of like that I lost 60 pounds. I look at all the other great things that I transformed in, the healthy habits now, the wanting to take time for myself, prioritizing me, and all these other things. And that's where my focus is, and where my motivational speaking is like that realm. And it's like, whatever, if I lost weight in the end, which was an added bonus, but it's not what I focus on, and it's not the numbers. And it's just kind of like, oh yeah, I kind of forget that that's also what happened, but it was a big transformation as well.
Do you have that response when you're talking to your group of teachers and stuff like that? Do they also notice that? Because my thoughts are then when you are speaking, that you likely aren't being like, hey guys, look at me, I lost 60 pounds. Like, look at this 60 pound. Like, do you see it versus this is actually what I went through. And this is how I believe you could take these little, bits and pieces and apply it to your own health and wellness journey. Like, do they have that response of like, well, gosh, you don't even talk about it really?
No, not that I've heard of from people, but I also don't really mention it, kind of thing. Like, obviously I have my before and after pictures. And it just was like, okay, this was me before. And I was willing, like, and my big focus was obviously to my girls, like establishing a healthy relationship with my body, so that my girls can see that. Because I remember, and a big thing of part of my discussion is like, my mom was very much that like diet culture world of the 80s and the 90s. And like, her language she used was always like, I'm so fat and I need to lose weight and blah, 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 and all this kind of stuff. And I really like, that's always what stuck with me. And I don't want that for my girls. So I think that's also too why I never really talk about it, because I don't like, it's not that I don't care, but I don't care what that number is. Like, yes, I'm just healthier and happier and more energetic and all the other things that just are so much with it. So when I talk to people and talk to teachers and stuff like that, it's like, with all these other things, like you prioritizing yourself and eating healthy and getting more energy, getting to the gym, like if you can lift a few weights and stuff, obviously everything else will come, including weight loss, but it's not my focus at all. If I mention it, it's just to like, oh, look, like it's a before and after picture, but it's never a number of what the poundage was.
Well, like when I think about your journey, and we can just kind of like summarize this, you did have intentional weight loss goals, and we absolutely met those goals. And you actually went above and beyond that after we met that first goal of weight loss. We did a reverse diet, you went into maintenance, and then you're like, okay, I'm going to do something else, right? So back to back, you did that. But through that entire time, I know people were probably looking at you saying, wow, look at the transformation. And they're looking at you thinking, wow, look at her. And that's what happens. We see these external things happen.
Yeah.
And it is a great way to motivate people, because like that's the extrinsic motivation. A lot of the times that's what gets people like rolling, like, oh, I saw Andrea do it, I can do it too. Like, I love the way she looks. This is kind of how I look too. We kind of have similar bodies. Like, I can do this. So they see that on the outside, but what they don't really capture is what you've had to go through.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the thing, like the learned behaviors, the unlearning, right? Because the relationship with either food or your body, that has to be addressed in a transformation. Now, of course, we had a photo shoot, and then you had a transformation wellness get on stage goal as well. Those two are a little bit more specific in the goal, but it still required habits, behaviors, and a change, because what we didn't want to have happen, and I talk about this a lot with my clients, is like, it's easy to actually lose weight if you actually follow protocol and do all the things that's required. It's the maintenance of it.
Yeah.
Right. So people might see the transformation on the outside. They don't understand the work that you've been putting in to get from point A to point B. So let's talk a little bit about that, because the work is beyond what we see on the outside. So what were some of the things that you know that you had to work on in order to be where you are right now? Like, you looking back, you know, those were the nuts and bolts.
So one of them was like and I didn't really realize it, but like stress eating. I didn't really realize that that's what I was doing until I was able to kind of name it. And my stress eating was ice cream. Like, people have their stress sometimes is like, oh my God, having a glass of wine or whatever. And that's never been me. But my stress thing was ice cream. And the more stress I had the day, the bigger the bowl of ice cream was. And I knew that that needed to be something that I changed big time. Also, and I think just that in like encompassing it all, like, and we've had that discussion a lot where I'm like, oh my God, I have felt more like anxious, or I felt more whatever, and I feel like I'm eating more. And you're like, well, why is it? And you ask all those great questions, and it always kind of goes back to, well, yeah, I am a bit more stressed and I am a bit more whatever. So it was just kind of learning how to manage that and just be like, okay, am I really stressed, or am I just wanting the comfort of the food kind of thing, and just using those tools to just kind of be about. I know another thing too is like, I don't know how to call it, but like I sleep, tired, eat. If I'm tired, I'm like, oh, I'm just hungry. And I'm like, no, I'm not hungry. I'm tired and I just need to go to bed kind of thing. So I know that I've also recognized. I'm like, hey, you know what? Just go to bed, go read. And I'm not really hungry, because then I'll lay there and I'll read and whatever and be like, oh yeah, see, I'm not hungry. I just was like tired, hungry, I guess you could say.
And those two things right there. So stress eating, and it's the cognitive, it's the self-control. So that's what that is. So it's related back to cognitive restraint and mental fatigue. So those are two real things. And those things would be overlooked, because we might call ourselves stress eaters, but here's the thing, what people won't do is they won't accept that.
Yes.
So they continue to just do it, because it's really tough to admit that you use food to manage your emotions, because there's a lot of shame, not so much guilt. But I would say people shame people into that. Like, how dare you? Like, you have no control. Like, they make that person feel so bad that the shame is there, but also the guilt of like, I did something wrong. So it's tough. But when you actually wrap your mind around that, you're like, wow, but this is actually a problem.
Yeah.
And so the acceptance is one of those things. Like, I would relate it back to even someone who recognizes they probably drink too much, but they just don't want to admit that maybe they are an alcoholic. And so like, or someone who is an actual true to be binge eater. It's a lot of, I would say there's a mental health component of it, but also too, it's just that whole acceptance of, it's not failure, but you almost want to feel like you're a failure. So therefore it's tough, right? And so using food as a method to make you feel better is just easier, right? That's why we take that route. It makes you feel better for that moment.
Oh, for sure.
With the lack of sleep, it is absolutely, there is science that backs it. I don't have the stuff to studies to cite that right now. However, I do know this, that when we don't get enough sleep, not only are we adding more stress to our body, now you're in a place of like less cognitive restraint. So it's easier for you to not make a deliberate decision to, not have, or to do something different. Like, I'll sit on the couch because I'm too tired. Okay, well, you should have done your workout though, but you're too tired.
Yeah.
Or it's just easier to order pizza and have the ice cream than it is to actually make a meal because I'm too fucking tired.
Yeah.
So those two absolutely can add up and can result into why you may not feel good. You may be making poor choices, all those things. But see, again, that's the internal shit. That's the stuff that actually makes the journey more successful, and it will last a lifetime. When you start to recognize the things, the more internal feelings, the stuff that's hidden behind the scenes, I guess,
yeah,
the underlying issues, when you start addressing those, that's where the things start to occur. But most people will just still say, Andrea, look at your biceps, look at your shoulders, I want those. And they don't understand what it took for you to get there, the work. Okay, so.
And I'll just say, like, oh, sorry, like, just I'll say too, like, when people do comment about it and they're like, oh, you look great in your arms and whatever, and I'll tell them, I'm like, you know what? It was a lot of fucking work. Like, I'm honest with them. I don't sugarcoat it. Like, this just didn't happen overnight. Like, this was a 3 or 4 year journey, and it still is a journey, I say, because I'm still figuring things out and how to always not go complete, like, reverse back to old habits and stuff like that. But it is a lot of work. And I think that's also too, like you're saying, a lot of people don't always recognize that it isn't like, it doesn't just happen in the snap of the finger. It's a process. No.
And the thing is that, like, I actually just had in my Fall Into Action group yesterday, I went in there with the intention of like having a 5-minute conversation to probably an hour talking about maintenance.
Yeah.
Because it's a misconception of like, oh, well, you're just maintaining your weight. That is not true.
No,
it is maintaining your habits and behaviors, because without that maintenance, you will not maintain your body weight.
Yeah.
Because you're going to revert, I guess, back to old habits. So always like, okay, if you started here at point A and you have to get here to point B, what did you do? And of that, because some of it you don't always have to do. Like, I would never say to you, Andrea, you're going to have to macro track for the rest of your life because that's what you did. Yeah. However, because you learned how to macro track, you understand portions, you're more aware of your choices and what led you to this weight loss. Now you know that you can increase these portions, eating all the foods that you enjoy, and have somewhat of a balanced, intake of food. Yes. You're not necessarily tracking every single day, because maintenance actually involves loosely tracking or portion control or being mindful, like, because you've taught yourself so much and you're working on those habits, behaviors. So here's the thing that I would ask you. And I know this is the woo-woo stuff, but we talked a lot about mindset, and it's a word it's a buzzword still to this day, still buzzword. People call themselves mindset coaches and all that kind of stuff. And I call bullshit on that, because there's more to it than that. But you did take a shift in that. So you went from probably a little bit more of that fixed mindset of like, this is fucking hard every time I diet, or, get fixated on, maybe even fad diets, or hearing your mom's voice of like, this is what you need to do. This is what I've tried, to all these things that like, maybe I don't even know if I'm ever going to get there, to I'm going to fucking do this.
Yeah.
And I'm going to get shit done. So that growth mindset, where do you think it really started to make that like you were cultivating it from the very beginning. And I like to point that out. Yeah. That anybody that actually reaches out to a coach and has this dream, that the fact that you're reaching out and asking for accountability, asking for guidance, is a sign of a challenge that you're willing to face.
Yeah.
How you're going to get there is going to be broken down in different, segments of the journey. However, the fact that you did that, but I noticed that it was still like you struggled in the very beginning of like understanding how to do this without having to go extremes. Yeah. Like even for, like, do we have diet breaks? Do we have, do you need to do all the exercise? How about we not do CrossFit and do some bodybuilding? Like, it's like all these things. And it's a challenge for you to be like, really?
Yeah.
Like, you don't want me to exercise as much, or you just want me to walk.
Yeah.
So where do you think that step from like that fixed to almost that growth of eventually gonna get there type of thinking, where do you think that happened? Did it take the entire process to be where you are right now? Or do you think that it was just like you're picking up, pieces along the way?
I think, no, it definitely wasn't like where I am now. I think it kind of was pieces along the way. Like, and I think, so I did my photo shoot first in November 2020. So I would say like September. So I started working with you January 2020. And we kind of did like the group coaching. And then I went to one-on-one and we transformed. And I would say it probably kind of was like September, October. So like 2 months before my photo shoot. because I was seeing the results. And I was like, oh yeah, like this is working, and like just lifting weights does work, and just walking does work. Like I don't have to kill myself with cardio, and I don't have to do like these AMRAPs every day to like, oh my God, I feel like I'm going to faint and vomit and everything, because you're not having the caloric intake, obviously, to sustain that. And I think it just was like understanding that like, oh, these two simple exercises that everybody, like you always see people on Instagram and social media and whatever, like, oh, they're crushing it and they're doing this and they're doing that and whatever, that you think you have to do that, but you really don't. Like, and I think that's where the mind shift started. And then when I did the next weight loss transformation thing on stage the next November, I really trusted the process, and I really trusted like, Kate, you know what, like this does work, and it is going to get hard, and it is going to be challenging, but I can do it. And I think it just is that sense of accomplishment.
That right there is, I couldn't wait for you to say it, like I can. That is the belief right there. You just summarized what it requires. You have to believe. You have to, at one point in time, buy into the fact that you are capable of doing hard things.
Yes.
Like, you know, is it Glennon Doyle that says we can do hard things?
Yeah, I just was listening to her podcast.
I mean, that is it. Like you can do hard things. And when you start to believe in that, that's just give me shivers. When you start to believe that, that's the shift, because that I can do this, I am capable, leads to eventually. And we know in the literature and scientific evidence that mindset shift, a growth mindset, is absolutely required for real transformations to occur, specifically to health and wellness and physical goals. Yeah. Because you have to buy into, like, you have to be hopeful. You have to accept the challenges. It's going to get hard. Yeah. You have to be willing to shift and pivot and not be like, fuck it. Because that all or nothing mindset, those extreme thoughts and protocols are what leads you to quitting. Yeah. Because it becomes so unsustainable, right? So I love that. So those were the steps. Like you took those steps. I love that. So you can do it.
You can. And it just, like you said, like that fuck it mindset, like that's definitely how I was before. It was like, oh, I've already had a donut. So like, oh, whatever, I've already lost all hope. So now I'll have the ice cream and another donut and the whatever, like the poutine, because I'm out. And like we said, like I just told you, this is the first time I've been in Toronto for Thanksgiving that I'm not dieting. So it was like different, because I was like, oh, and you're like, oh, how are you going to manage? And I was like, I'm just going to be like I would at home, and I might enjoy a donut. And yes, we got donuts the other day, but I stopped at one. Like I didn't have like, oh, and this and this and this. So it's, that mindset too has really changed of like the fuck it. It's just like, okay, I had it. I enjoyed it. Now keep going about with your day and keep going with like how I normally would be, and not just indulge on everything too. So it was just like, and I think that all those little steps too helped obviously with where I am. And it's like, yeah, you know what? Like I was able to sustain at 1400 calories, and I was able to like do it, and I could do it, and I can do it now still probably. Like it just, you don't need to encompass everything.
Well, and here, let's go back though. When you were on 1400 calories, it was for specific, and by the end, that was near the end, by the way. We actually tried to dip below that, and Andrea was like, nope. And we had this conversation. Okay, we're not there. Yeah. So, because sometimes we do have to dig. She was a smaller human, all that kind of stuff, just in case somebody comes out and says, well, 1400 calories is not enough to sustain an adult. Yeah, nope. This is a diet phase. Again, don't assume. Nope. Get the information first.
That was the end.
Yeah, so that was near the end. But the thing is that that's not where you, like, that is where you were, but you had the tools to kind of like, okay, if this is what it took to get here, I know I can't sustain here. I want to live my best life. I want to live at quote unquote, we're going to just call it maintenance, but I think it's just living your best life. You still had to encompass all these habits and behaviors. And what I think is really cool about this, and what I want to bring to your attention, because I don't know if you recognize this, is that you're not dieting right now. Yeah. You are maintaining.
Yes.
And that is not seen very often.
Yeah.
Post weight loss journeys. And that's what I wanted. This is why I wanted to bring you on the podcast again, because you lost a shit ton of weight. What are the numbers in total?
I think it was like 60-ish. I don't know exactly what I was at the beginning, because I never weighed myself because I was too scared to. So when I actually got onto a scale, probably 6 or 7 months into the process,
Yeah.
I was at a certain number. And from that, I was like 60. So that's why I kind of say,
yeah. So to give people some insight, if you kind of like are at a heavier weight for a very long period of time, you've gained this, and this is kind of how you live your life. When you diet and you lose body fat, and even if you lose a little bit of muscle mass, your body, your brain is going to want to get you back to that because it kind of deems it as its settling point, right? Like it's kind of where it's been happy. It's homeostasis. So you've had to encompass all these habits and behaviors to essentially be where you are now, maintaining the 60-pound weight loss, plus or minus a few pounds, because let's be honest, it's not going to be exact. But this is why you don't have to diet again, though.
Yes.
And that's my point is like, people are always on this yo-yo, and it's okay. Like you might reach out to me 6 months from now and be like, I've been thinking long and hard about this, and I really do want to do a competition or something like that, right? I'm not putting that in there. I'm not saying you're doing that, but that could be an intentional weight loss goal that you have now decided on again, because you've taken the time to build some muscle and whatever. And that's fine. That is a choice to diet for that specific goal, but you're not dieting because you feel like I'm unhappy with my body, all these things, right? And again, you're not someone who's shredded right now. You are in a good place where you feel good. You can balance everything. So my point, I guess, going back to this, is that you cultivated this growth mindset. You have all these habits and behaviors. And now you're in Toronto for the first time because, every time she's gone out there, she's been dieting. You are living your life and quote unquote maintaining and feeling good about that. And that is the transformation people do not see or even want to fucking listen to. You know why? Because they just want the quick fix.
Exactly.
They want the simple answer.
Yeah. Because it's still like, and like you said, it's not that I need to track, and I loosely track, like we've said. And I know sometimes I'm like, I can recognize that I've been eating a few more calories. And I'm saying my normal maintenance is between like 18 to 2000 kind of. And it's like, oh, maybe I've been like 22 to 25 for a month now or whatever. So it's like reining it back a little bit. And it's just like, okay, how much did this? And then I recognize too, usually when I eat the higher calorie portions is because I didn't have enough protein during the day. And then at night is kind of like, oh, I'm not full because I haven't had. And that too, I think has really helped was the dieting process of understanding what different macros do for your body, and like having to be on such high protein and realizing you're only on 1400 calories. But how was I able to like not feel starving? Like I should not feel hungry on 2000 calories because I'm eating like almost I don't know, I'm terrible at the math, but like a quarter more, 3/4 more calories. And it's like, I shouldn't be hungry. It's because like, because for lunch I chose to have this and this. I chose to have more carbs and fats,
maybe foods that aren't satiating, maybe foods that are actually hyperpalatable and easy to overeat, and they won't, as much as they keep you happy in that moment.
Yeah.
An hour later, you're like, fuck, I'm still hungry.
I know. And then you're like, oh shit, I shouldn't like, and I think that too is just that mind shift too, of just like, okay, if you look back, like I can recognize now, like what was not the mistake, but like where I was lacking, or maybe where I was like, oh, I'll have this versus this. And I really should have had the other thing.
Let's talk about that a little bit, because you and I have had conversations over the last year where you've reached out and said, I'm not feeling my best. I kind of feel like maybe, and to be honest, I appreciate these text messages and touch base with former clients, because it allows me to just have them rethink what they're actually sending to me. So, and just be like, okay, let's review what we've gone through. So Andrea might reach out on occasion and be like, I don't feel like I'm on track, or maybe I feel like bloated, or I feel like I might have gained. And I will ask her those questions of like, okay, so what's true about those thoughts? Like what's actually been happening? And this is where Andrea might catch herself saying, yeah, like I actually haven't been eating a ton of protein. And I probably have been eating a little bit more total calories in general, just because I'm probably not as satiated. And I am probably leaning into more of like, okay, maybe I'm having 2 scoops of ice cream versus the one, because god damn, it's so good.
Yeah.
But in that moment, she's not like actively gaining weight and like, oh my God, it's like she's caught herself because she's starting to feel out of her quote unquote balance of what she has decided for herself. And this is the thing, like no one knows what maintenance looks like. No one knows what a balanced life looks like. It has to be specific to that human. But the bottom line is that you, because the work you put in, you felt out of sort. So when people say to me they fall off track, in a lot of cases, maybe it is because of the structure they've had, but in most cases, it's actually the restrictions they put in place. And that's what makes them feel like they're falling off track. Whereas you, it might take you months to feel like, oh,
yeah,
okay, I feel like I need to tighten things up. But that's because maintenance is such a large, it's a large spectrum. And in most of the time, you were doing all the things.
Yeah.
Because let's be real, life.
Yes.
You're going to have an extra donut. You're going to have 5 guys and have extra fries because your girls aren't finishing it.
Exactly.
So I really, think that it's important to emphasize again that the transformation, if you want something like 60 pounds, 30 pounds, even 10 pounds to last a lifetime, you got to do the work. Yes. And it's all this underlying stuff. And you'll notice how we barely even talked about the pounds lost.
Yeah.
That's not what it's about.
No, it's not. And that's like, so what I feel like people, and I was very much like that. Like I was fixated on the number. And then it just kind of was like, well, now like the number is so irrelevant to me that it's just everything else, because everything else is leading to where, or led to where I am today. And like you said, with the maintenance, like I've now been in maintenance probably since January, because we had the show in November, reverse dieted, a bit out. And then, and it's just kind of been nice. And it's just like, okay, this is what I do. I've been dropped like a day of weights. And I remember texting you about that, like, oh my God, should I do this? But you know what? I feel so much happier having done that, because that 5th workout was just like, oh my God, like I just have to go to the gym again. But now that I do 4 days of weights, like it just is like nice. Like I enjoy going to the gym those 4 days. And it just is like, you know what? I'm going to put it all on the floor when I get there. And then I have like just my weekend to just like enjoy with my kids, and they're busy as well with their schedules. And it's not like stressing about like, oh my God, I have to get to the gym this weekend. It's just like, you know what? I'll do 1 active day. I do 1 full rest day. I just do an active like recovery, go for a long walk or whatever, or stuff like that. And I just feel like that also is just like, it doesn't need to be like it was, because I'm not trying to be that person who photo shoots.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
That discussion so much too, because it's just like, I've texted you, I'm like, even too, I was looking at pictures from last Thanksgiving. I was like, ooh, look at like my face is way leaner and my arms are really, but I'm like, but I remember coming here that time and being like, no, I can't have that. No, it doesn't fit today. No, I can't, like, I'll do that maybe another day. Where now it's just like, I was able to enjoy all the things I wanted to do. We went out for longer walks because I wasn't as exhausted.
Do you know what I'm going to ask you a question about your stress eating, but I just want to kind of point out too, like the thing about quote unquote maintenance is that people have to understand that maintenance is boring as fuck. So right now you're not actively pursuing anything other than the goal to just maintain. And that maintenance, again, looks different for everybody, right? But because maintenance involves things like, well, I don't want to track, or I want to loosely track. I want to do this. I want to do that. Like, it's just, you're not fixated on food. You're not thinking about food. You're not guilt and shame around food. Like that to me is maintenance. And that's essentially where I've been for the last 6 years of my life. And I worked my fucking ass to get there. But that'll being said, I just want to put that out there. It's like, if you're someone who is still struggling in your so-called maintenance phase, it's because you're not actually happy with where you're at. You're still trying to be in a fat loss phase when you're actually telling yourself you want to be in maintenance. And that's conflicting. It's kind of like the person who comes to me and says, I want weight loss, but I want to gain muscle. Okay, well, let's periodize this. You can change, you can absolutely do body recomp. But what I'm saying is, like, a lot of the times why people can't quote unquote maintain is because they're actually not where they want to be. And they're not patient enough to do the nutritional periodization of a fat loss phase, a maintenance phase, gain some muscle mass phase, if that's even in that genre. But again, like the reason why I like to say that I'm in a balanced life and maintenance, because I don't want to ever pursue weight loss again. So I promised myself a very long time ago, the minute I actually walked off stage, is like, I never want to diet again. I had to hit rock bottom in that dieting phase now, and nobody, and I repeat, nobody has to go through an extreme phase, but a lot of times a life event, trauma or anything like that can absolutely ignite that fire to not want to be anymore. It could be a diagnosis of like high cholesterol, or a family member died of heart disease. Like that shit can absolutely catapult you into a place of like, I'm never going back. But at the end of the day, I just wanted to put that out there, because Andrea's in a place where she can do this because she's not actively pursuing to be a smaller human. And it might change. She might change her mind, like I said, a month from now, 6 months from now, January 1st. So the question I want to have for you, or I have for you, Andrea, when's the last time you truly found yourself stress eating?
I don't know. I honestly can't.
There we go.
Yeah, because like,
so,
yeah.
I mean, I don't even know what to say to that, because I'm not saying you're never going to.
Yeah.
But you now have the tools and the strategies.
Yeah.
And this is why maintenance is easier for you, because the habit or the behavior of stress eating is no longer part of your protocol.
Yeah.
And what I often say to people, if you can work on the internal shit, the weight loss is essentially a byproduct of the stimuli given. Mm-hmm. So calorie deficit, weight loss, and how you adhere to that calorie deficit, weight loss. And if that means you've got to reverse engineer some things of like, okay, well, the reason why I've been gaining is because I'm a stress eater, or quote unquote, I like to binge eat on the weekends or cheat meals. If you start to reel in some of those habits and behaviors without actually pursuing an actual calorie deficit, you will probably see changes, because those habits and behaviors, they equal a surplus in most cases. I would almost guarantee anytime somebody is stress eating or binge eating, emotional eating, whatever you want to call it, eating cheat meals, that stuff leads to a surplus and or keeping you exactly the same way, because you keep yourself at maintenance, right? So that's, I wanted to point that out, that if you are no longer someone who's a stress eater, you don't identify as that person anymore.
No.
That's why it's easier for you to actually follow through with your quote unquote maintenance phase and or where you are right now.
Yeah, because it just has been like such a change of like, and two, like I've obviously changed my, not my life, but like I'm a substitute teacher now. So I have a little bit more flexibility, and I like recognize too, like my husband works, he owns his own company, and he has a lot of stresses on his life too. And it just kind of like our jobs weren't jiving together, as in like I couldn't work a full-time job and be mom and do all this shit like I needed to do. And I was like, I've been asking him to change or whatever. And I know that he's also owning his own company, so more stresses and whatever come with that. So I changed what I could in my life, which would work. And right now it's subbing. Because if I need to take a day off, it's much easier. It's not a fight of who's going to stay home. It's not a fight of like whatever. So I feel that too, like just with the stress eating, I've just put less stress on myself. And I have to say, like, obviously I've come from a very fortunate situation that I can do that. Like we've been able to fix that. And I understand that that's a privilege, but like at the same time, I needed to do what would work for me. And I needed to do and that's what a lot of my stuff about is like learning what works for you and prioritizing yourself. Because I feel like as mom and women and whatever, and teachers, we always put ourselves on the back burner. And that's kind of when I had approached you, and I knew like I needed to do this for myself first, because if I want to change and if I want to talk to other people and I want to be a positive change on other people, I need to be the positive person in myself too. So it just kind of all came hand in hand. And that's where this motivational speaking kind of came about.
Well, but it's interesting because there's a catch here though. On one hand, you can be someone who has a lot more time and flexibility, and now you can manage things because you've learned all the tools. But on the other hand, you can also have too much time and be like, holy fuck.
Yes.
And that becomes boredom eating and all these things. So you look at it in both ways, because I have women that I work with right now that are retired, and they're having a very hard time of managing their caloric intake because they're bored as fuck. Or they're spending a lot of time having wine with their girlfriends now.
I was just going to say, having coffee dates.
And now they're like, okay, but I'm going for lunch today and I just don't know how to navigate. Okay, but this is the thing. Like now you have too much time on your hands. You were complaining that you were too busy.
Yeah.
Now we need to learn how to navigate this. So the thing is that it's never going to be the perfect scenario.
No.
We have to learn to pivot. But this is the thing. 2020 brought us together.
Yes.
And since 2020, you've been working on the shit, and this stuff is still existing. And I've been working on it since the end of 2014, basically 2015, when I kind of felt like I was reverse dieted enough. And then I started in like basically maintenance. Let's call it what it really is.
Yeah.
But then I started to work with like, okay, how do I fuel my body for CrossFit? And I would say from 2016 till this day, I've been able to do all this shit even I've continued with the habits and behaviors. I'm not restrictive. I was even saving this to my group the other day. is that the one thing that I don't do is have guilt or shame. I have zero guilt around food. That was not like that even in existence, even maybe even 3 years ago. I still had some guilt, and I'm coaching this. So even the year before you and I met, there were still some of those feelings of like, I probably shouldn't have had that, because it took me, like, I was dieting for 4 years straight, but I also started way back in the day of bro science in 1998 of where you're not supposed to have anything. Don't even have sodium because everything is going to kill you and it's so bad for you.
Yeah.
So I had to unlearn a lot of bro science, a lot of learned behaviors. I had to unlearn a lot of that shit. So, I mean, that's why for me, it's so important to teach people, to educate on how you can lose weight. I could give you the numbers and just dial that shit in. But if you don't have those habits and behaviors, you're likely not going to succeed even in your weight loss, never mind maintenance, because maintenance is the hard part, because it's now you're not really actively pursuing anything. So, I want to say this, like, I really appreciate, your journey. I think I talked to you a little bit about this when we had our voice memos back and forth. Like, here at MBF, we don't share a lot of transformation pictures. I've shared a few of yours because you share them, and I feel like that's a privilege, and I will continue to share those pictures just to show people, I suppose, the external change.
Yeah.
But I always talk about the internal stuff, but that's the thing. It's so difficult for me as a nutrition coaching company who really focuses on the underlying stuff and the figure your shit out stuff. It's hard for me to show that transformation and to have people buy into it. Because if you're with us for like 4 months, which, we hope that people are, like, we really hope that a minimum of 4 months, sometimes we can't capture that external transformation. And they might have the tools to go on their own. And then a year from now, they're like, you don't even recognize them. Right. And that's the thing the take home here is like, for you as a human, if you're trying to achieve these outcome goals, you got to give yourself time, because like I said, and emphasizing that Andrea and I have been together for, off and on since 2020.
Yeah.
And it doesn't happen overnight. It took me, it's taken me 6 years to be kind of where I'm at too, and continuously working at it. And I mean, I don't focus on it now, but because it's so ingrained.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is that you can't capture this kind of shit in a 3-month or 4-month protocol, in my opinion. And that's what I see on a regular basis with my clients. It takes us time to get there. And I wanted to leave that with people. It's like, Andrea's done the work.
Yeah.
Like, this is where it's at. So is there anything that you want to, as a take home message, or anything you want to leave the audience with?
I think, that's the big thing, is just like that it takes time. And that's what so many people too are like, oh, well, like, how many times, like, how'd you get to look like that? How many times are you in the gym? I'm like, I could be at the gym 8 times. It doesn't matter. But that was one of 10 things I needed to work on so that they all worked together. And that's what I think people need to realize. It's not just the diet. It's not just going to the gym. It's not just steps. It's not just sleep. It's not just stress levels. Like, it's all encompassing. And if you want, like, it's a whole pie, and if a piece of the pie is missing, it's not going to work as well. It can work, but it's not going to be as great. And I just know that, like, give yourself time, allow yourself to have time. If you want this to really succeed, like, I am now, like we said, 9 months into maintenance, and I am very happy with where I'm at. But the reason I am like that is because of all the tools I have used. And it took me 2 years to figure that out, to give myself 9 months of just like enjoying. So just like, know that, like, you looking in the snapshot and whatever is like, it's a time frame. It's not just like, and that's what I post a lot about too, is like, this took 3 years to accomplish. And I say 2020 was just starting to work with you. I was working on it even before that, like 2 years. And that was just going to the gym and starting to run a little bit, and just getting myself like to a place where I knew I touched with you, because I knew that's where my next step was. And it's like, just give yourself time, allow yourself to create the habit, and then add something. If everybody changes too many things at once too, that's never going to work either.
Yeah. And I think that the one thing that I want to say, well, it's not one thing, but it's like a combination of understanding that we talked a little bit about growth mindset. And in that, it just means that you are willing to do the work, face the challenges, think in the term of eventually I'm going to get there. So that's exactly what Andrea, like, that was her approach. It may not have been the exact approach in the beginning, but she started to realize that if I'm capable of doing this, if I continue to do this, if I keep telling myself I can do this, I'm eventually going to get to where I want to be.
Yeah.
And I think that's really, really important. And I mean, having this, you can hope and you can dream, but you have to be an action taker. And I think that that's part of it, is that she said it right there. It's like, if you're trying to do all the things, it's going to overwhelm you and you're not going to succeed. Because you're going to listen to this podcast and be like, okay, Andrea said, like, I should be doing this and this, like, I got to beat the whole pie.
Yeah.
But no, we didn't do the whole pie at one time.
No, we
took
didn't.
that pie and we broke it into segments. And okay, so this is the stress part of it. This is the training part of it. So which of this entire pie do you want to work on right now that you can freaking smash?
Yeah.
And, and eat and enjoy. And Andrea would pick apart those things. This was never something where you have to do, this is what I want you to do, Andrea. You have to do this now. There were certain aspects of the dieting part for the specific photo shoot that were protocoled and had to be followed through, because that's the buy-in to the process of that specific goal. But generally speaking, we were chipping away. And that is the name of the game, is like, don't overwhelm yourself. Don't think you got to do everything, and you have to give yourself the time. I'm going to leave you with this. When you look at the big picture, you are a byproduct of the choices you've been making. So think about where you are right now.
Mm-hmm.
Think about where you were. You are like, when you came to me, you were a byproduct of the choices.
Yes.
You were still 60 pounds heavier than what you wanted to be. Habits and behaviors that were ingrained there. And now you're a byproduct of the choice you've been making, which is where you are now. So my message to everybody is this, is you have to recognize that and accept that it's not your thyroid, it's not your PCOS, it's not your Hashimoto's, it's none of that stuff. I mean, there are underlying conditions. I'm not saying that does not have impact. However, 90% of the time, it is a lifestyle factor, many factors that contribute to where you are.
Yes.
Obesity, gaining weight, it's a very complex way, because obesity is the disease, but the actual like gaining weight, like that's a byproduct. And the bottom line is that if you want to change that, you have to be willing to change what you are doing, what your choices are, those habits, behaviors, the relationships you have, your environment. Like Andrea said, there are so many pieces to this pie and this puzzle that you have to be willing to zoom out and take a really, really good look at to see what it is that is holding you back from achieving these outcome goals, and eventually getting to a place where you can actually call yourself sitting in maintenance.
Yeah.
This has been awesome, Andrea. Okay, so we will obviously put everything into the show notes and stuff like that, but where can people find you, just in case?
I'm on Instagram at fit.wonder.womom is my best place to find me. Email is the same at gmail.com. If you have any questions, or just DM me on Instagram, I'm happy to help and answer any questions.
And if you are a teacher listening to this and you feel like Andrea would be an awesome opportunity to listen to, and you think that she would be great for your school,
reach out.
Reach out, because I know her journey is going to benefit, and it's not about the exact steps, it's about all the things that she has lived through, learned. She's taking the opportunities to actually embrace that stuff and share it with you guys. So definitely reach out to her. All right, Andrea, it's been a blast. Thank you so much, and we'll see everybody on the next episode.